Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of Warm Weather Fans, the Sunbelt Podcast. I am your host, as always, Brian Stone. Once again, joined by Zeke Palermo, who was here last week, and Matt Migas, who rejoins the show after being out last week. Boys, how are we doing? How are things? I have a mini little tangent, like a very, very small tangent about the NCAA football game. But until we get to that, Zeke, how are you? And then throw it over to Matt.
I'm doing really well. I had Chipotle tonight for the first time since the discourse over Chipotle serving sizes blew up, and at least the one near me seemed to figure it out because it was a damn good meal. Bowl a little light on the meat, but they made up for it with the rice. Incredible dinner. They made amends.
Well, they don't get used to it because their CEO just left to be the new CEO of Starbucks, so that might not last very long. Matt, how are you doing?
Oh my god, Chipotle! Chipotle is my life. Shout out to the Vine era kid. No man, I'm good. College football it is another day closer. Hell, when you really think about it, there's some games that are just 10 days away. Which is absolutely insane. And looking forward to chopping it up about two of the best in the belt tonight.
Absolutely. My little thing, I had this happen last night when I was playing the NCAA game. So, the only reason I brought it up is because it literally happened like less than 24 hours ago. I was playing as Georgia Southern against, I want to say, JMU, and I was up 28-23 with 3 seconds to go, and their quarterback threw a Hail Mary and beat me like with no time on the clock. And I also found out that in NCAA, at least from what I can tell, there are no coverages made to cover the deep part of the field in that situation. I had to run cover 4, and I guess one of the receivers just ran between the zones. And
there is.
I'm telling you, in like the coach suggestion box, like it wasn't in there. And I took my last 2 timeouts to look through every defensive play that I could find. It's at least not in the 4-2-5 playbook.
There should be a formation in every playbook called prevent, and it's just 3 down linemen, like 7, 8 DBs, and it's got like a deep cover 3, some sort of man zone type deal. I think it's it comes standard in every defensive playbook.
Well, then what you need to do, Brian, is you need to go create your own playbook and put the 11 guys stand at the goal line play.
Or I do the old Jets thing where I just send 11 guys at the quarterback and just hope. Like, he just doesn't
want to get there first.
Yeah. Can't block all 11, am I right? Well, I get you kind of could in an EA Sports game. All right. So let's get to here. We are here to talk about Appalachian State and Texas State today. As Matt said, two of the 3 teams rather, that I expect to be at the top of the Sun Belt standings once it's all said and done at the end of this year, along with Louisiana. So let's get into it here. Let's start with App State. I think that they are not only a very good team, I think they are going to feast on a conference that has kind of taken a step back overall this season. Now, I will say one thing I was surprised about, and we'll talk more about this next week when we talk about them. They have the same win total over-under on DraftKings as James Madison does. And that kind of surprised me because of how many pieces that James Madison is having to replace, and new coach, new quarterback, like all of that stuff. But both of their over-unders were 8, according to DraftKings, from what I could tell today, along with Texas State. I mean, I don't want to step on it, but Texas State and App State, both over-under was 8. So I would take the over. I mean, we can go ahead and skip that, but I would take the over just based on the amount of talent they have. Zeke has made reference to this, and I agree. I think a lot of the teams that have been good to competitive, really, really good, like Troy, to competitive, are going to take a step back, and it's just kind of going to open up for App to say, all right, all we got to do is kind of make it through, and we're probably going to be in the Sun Belt title game out of the East because the East is weakest of all. I mean, unless James Madison really makes that jump that the sports books are expecting. So, what are you guys kind of overview before we jump into like position specifics?
I mean, I think you're right. App State is the only team in the East that I think is staying even, if not getting better, from last year to this. From a talent perspective, from a just overall program situation point. And again, not to step on the toes on our own toes, but Texas State is kind of similar, where they're maybe the only team in the West that's in as good, if not better, position than they were last year. App has some really interesting pieces. I think offensively that took last year as, first year in the offense or first year with a big role that I expect to flourish as true number ones in the running and passing or receiving games. But I'm going to say what I've said about Sean Clark forever is that I have no faith in him to hold a lead. I have no faith in him to, mount a comeback. I had a Twitter thread sometime last year where I figured out on average, App is scoring 11 more points in one half than they are the other. It doesn't matter first or second, and that just means they're showing up for one half and not the other. Whether it's the first or second, it's a coin flip. And that's been App State's issue for the past several years. So even though they're the best team, and I think they'll win the East, I do so cautiously because with Sean Clark has proved that he can lose or at least keep bad teams in any game just because of his inability to maintain leads or, start strong.
Matt, I'll throw it to you on this, but I disagree kind of with what Zeke is saying. I think last year kind of showed me that Clark was able to, and we brought up this on the Phil Steele interview episode, but last year sort of proved to me that he was finally able to kind of get his own guys in there and win with them rather than piggyback off the Drinkwitz Satterfield recruiting level. But I just think everything lines up too perfectly for them. Now, I will say this: if something goes wrong, like for some reason they're not in the Sun Belt title game or they don't win over 8 games, I think things could get ugly because expectations are as high as they probably have ever been for him at this point. But I'll address that when it happens, but I'm not going to project that as a certainty. But Matt, how do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, look, we're talking about a program that has had tons of success, and there's a standard, there's an expectation, right? But let's keep in mind that Sean Clark has won 9 or more games 3 of the 4 years that he's been the head coach at App. Like let's not sit here and talk about this guy being. Let's not act like this guy's on the hot seat, right?
Mm-hmm.
His job is not in danger. Like it's just not. App State would have to go basically winless for Sean Clark to get fired. Look, I think after a down year in 22 where they went 6-6, had some issues. You bring in Joey Aguilar last year. He breaks the single season program passing record that Chase Bryce had broken just a couple years before. They win 9 games and they play in the Sun Belt Championship game. I think now Aguilar has a season under his belt. He won Newcomer of the Year. He doesn't have, I don't want to say he doesn't have anything to prove, but he doesn't have much to prove. Like, App State knows what they're going to get with this guy at quarterback, right? You have a running back like Kanye Roberts. you have a receiving core like Christian Horn and Caden Robinson, and obviously we'll dive deeper into that, as the episode goes on. But look, App State's the favorite in the East. Some people have them as the favorite overall in the Sun Belt Conference, and I don't necessarily disagree with that. I think on paper, they're the team to beat in the Sun Belt. They have some of the most continuity from a year before, especially key positions. Your coaching staff has been held together fairly well over the last couple of years, and App State knows how to win football games. Sean Clark is App State through and through. He knows what is expected. He knows what it takes to win there, and they're going to have no problems doing it in 2024.
Now, I will say this. I don't necessarily agree with Zeke's point about Sean Clark, but I will say last year had a couple of losses that they had that were just kind of inexplicable, frankly. I mean, you go back and look. I mean, they lost to Wyoming, Coastal Carolina. That game was, I mean, choke city. Like they were running away with it, and their receiver fumbles, and McCall takes Coastal back down the field, and they kick a field goal with no
You
time
only
left
beat
and win
Monroe
the
by
game.
1.
Yeah, that too.
On a
I mean,
last-minute field goal, too.
Yeah, so
True.
that's the thing about Sean Clark is he has the most loaded roster, I think, top to bottom. I think Texas State, who, I mean, I guess I'll go ahead and say this now. I think Texas State has the best offense, but I think if you look at a total roster from offense, defense, special teams, I think it's App. I mean, it's just like Texas State. I'll get into my concerns with them in a little bit, but there always is the chance that they lay just a stinker for like no reason. And we've seen it happen a couple of years in a row now. Now, I agree with what you're saying. He's got a great resume. However, again, if you had a coach come in and was just gifted, like let's say last year's JMU team stayed together. Let's say Bob Chesney comes in, all of a sudden he's got Jordan McLeod, he's got all these defensive ends, he's got all these pass rushers. Yeah, he's probably going to win 10 games too. I mean, if you just gift wrap a coach easily the best roster in the conference, you should win, the East Division or the conference as a whole or whatever. So he's kind of played to, I guess, App's expectations, and then 22 happens, and we talked about, that going back a couple of years. And then last year kind of, like I said, finally cemented for me that Sean Clark could not only recruit well and develop those guys, but he could win with his own set of players. So Matt, you already talked about Joey Aguilar. I think he's the second best quarterback in the Sun Belt. I mean, I think McLeod's still won until he gets dethroned. I mean, he was the Sun Belt Player of the Year. But that is going to be a huge advantage. And we talked about it last year. How bad do you have to feel if you're Ryan Berger, who was going into last year, hurts his finger, we talked about it, Wally pipped, and just doesn't have a starting job anymore with this great roster. I mean, it's tough. So Aguilar played great coming in. Unlike a lot of episodes that we've done, I don't really have it. I mean, he's established at this point. Like, I don't really have any concerns with him. So, do you guys have anything else to say about him? I mean, we can move on to the running game. Kanye Roberts. Matt, go ahead.
Really quickly, I just want to throw out that Ryan Berger is now at Liberty. Just for what it's worth. He's no longer with App State. But you know who is? You know who Joey Aguilar's backup quarterback is?
Yeah, I do. Billy
It's
Wiles.
Good old Billy Wiles, baby.
God,
from
dang
Southern Miss. The man found a way to stay in the Fun Belt. Billy freaking Wiles.
You know what? Not only did he find a way to stay in the Fun Belt, he found a way to wear the same color scheme, which is impressive.
Right. He needs no new gear.
No, they're like,
Well, actually,
hey, we're gonna
he does because they wear Nike, and Southern Miss doesn't.
We're gonna issue you some gold socks. No need, got it covered.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
I'll just flip them inside out so you can't see the Adidas logo.
Now, I will say this: and Zeke will undoubtedly agree with me. If Aguilar gets hurt, they are screwed because Billy Wiles could not do anything for Southern Miss last
I'll
year.
tell you,
He was awful.
obviously Billy Wiles not a good quarterback, but this transitions really well into the run game that App State has boasted so proudly over the past several years. Up until last season, they had 10 consecutive years with 1,000-yard rusher. Last year went a bit more to a split backfield between Nate Noel and Kanye Roberts. Roberts, who's still with the team, was exceptional last season, and I expect, much like Billy Wiles had Frank Gore to rely on, uh, he'll have the running back stable that has become the uh, defining feature of these App State teams over the past several years. Just a incredible running back one, but then also a guy that behind him who can still run for 400 yards out of the 2 spot.
Yeah,
For
you know,
sure.
you bring up Kanye Roberts, and again, I agree with you. 6.7 yards per carry in 2022, 5.7 last year. Just a really effective and efficient running back. But like you mentioned, they're deep at that running back spot. You've got three guys behind Roberts that got significant carries last year. You got Castle, Haywood,
Mm-hmm.
and Amani Marshall. I mean, look, Marshall only got 20 carries, but Castle had 53 and Haywood had 60. I mean, these guys have experience. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they share the wealth. Obviously, Kanye Roberts is going to be number one, but then you've got a trio behind him that, if needed, you can go to them too and feel pretty confident that they can make something happen for you.
For sure. Running the football has never been difficult for App State. I mean, that has sort of been their bread and butter going back to, I can't even name how many great running backs they've had. Um, Kind of transitioning into the pass game a little bit more. I mean, we talked about Joey Aguilar. We can't say enough good things about him. Came in as a JUCO, wasn't even expected to start. Only got thrust into the starting lineup due to injury, and then just crushed it. Um, Now, I will say I'm really impressed by the size of their starting receiving core. Usually when you look and you see, like, who's gonna play the slot? Oh, it's gonna be some guy who's 5'9", 5'10". Their 3 starting receivers, according to Phil Steele's magazine, are 6'4", 6'2", and 6'2".
Mhm.
Go up and get it. So, all he's gotta do is kinda put it in, and that's not even mentioning Eli Wilson, who was second team Sun Belt last year. So, I'm just saying, like, he's got a plethora of passing options. They've kind of always, well, not always, going back a couple years now, they've more been spread out as far as the passing attack goes. They don't funnel, all of their targets to kind of one or two guys. Um, but I will say the running game kind of subsidizes that, where you don't really have to worry about, and the defense too, but you don't have to worry about the passing game being as prolific as a Texas State or one of these Arkansas State or one of those teams, because the running game is just so immaculate that you're just sort of like, we can kind of do whatever the defense wants to give us, we'll take it. So
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
yeah, do you guys have anything to add on kind of the receiving core? I mean, I know we're kind of just gushing, but I mean, it is, they're the favorites for a reason.
It deserved to be gushed about. They're returning their 4 leading receivers, bring back their highest receiving tight end from last year. I mean, there's 5 guys on this roster who are going to, rack up 350, 400 yards at least. And then you add like Caden Robinson, who's probably going to be the top guy. He'll get 700. Like if they want to funnel to him, like you mentioned, he could get 1,100 yards. But he doesn't need to, as you just said, because of the strong run game. This offensive group as a whole has, as we led with at the top, continuity that a lot of other belt teams are lacking right now. And we are gushing because they were strong last season, and presumably only stronger this year.
So, one area they don't have a lot of returning production on the offensive side is the line. They only have one returning offensive lineman from last year, but I will say, and I haven't given other teams the benefit of the doubt on this when we've been doing the previews, but I'm going to give it to App. Sean Clark comes from an offensive line coach background. So, if there is one unit I feel good about him developing, a new group, it would be that. If they had a new set of receivers that were all brand new and, the only time they had spent together was in the spring, that would be a little bit concerning. But the offensive line, I mean, like I said, that's his background. That's his bread and butter. So there shouldn't be any issues there, even though you've got, Thornton Gentry is the only returner from last year at the right guard spot. Although he played left tackle in 9 games last year. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think they'll be okay on the line regardless of having 4 new faces up there. Um, Matt, how do you feel about kind of the offensive line as a whole?
I agree with Phil Steele when he says they're going to be the surprise unit of the team. And here's the thing. Look, they only return one starter, and I agree that that's a problem. But look, Caden Sweat's a redshirt freshman, coming off of a redshirt. He's got a year of experience under his belt. Obviously, playing and being on the sideline, two totally different things. But he knows the program. He knows the playbook. That experience certainly helps. But here's the biggest thing with this App State offensive line for me. They lost a teammate last year. Jack Murphy, excuse me, passed away very tragically during the offseason. And so, it's that whole playing for something bigger mentality, right? That's going to motivate this group all season long. It's going to motivate Sean Clark in this offense as well. And I think that really turning a negative into a positive. I really think that that's going to benefit App State this year, having that extra motivation to play for their teammate. And so I think that this group is going to be really strong top to bottom. And like we said earlier, App State's had no issues running the football over the years, and that's definitely going to start with their front five.
So, all in all, 5 returners on offense, 6 returning starters on the defensive side of the ball. I want to start up front because they had sort of a unique problem that a lot of these other teams did not last year, which was great rushing the passer as a unit, 35 sacks as a team. However, on the flip side, they gave up an average of 178 rushing yards per game. And then I think I'd have to go back and find it, but I think Phil Steele said they gave up 4 200-yard rushing games last year, I believe. I'll go back through and try to find it the exact number. 5. So I mean that's pretty nuts for a unit that you would think like, "Oh, if they can get to the quarterback, clearly teams running the ball isn't going to be an issue." It was. And so that's going to be something to kind of track and see, hey, have they made strides in the, fitting the run fits, clearing gaps, getting offensive linemen out of the way because they really did struggle with it last year. So that's sort of my question. One person, they run this 3-4 front. One person I wanted to single out, um, Sean Collins is back on the defensive line, along with Marcus Clark at nose tackle. Those guys are going to have to kind of be the anchors up front because they really did struggle stopping other teams from running the football last year, and it showed. I mean, they lost 5 games in a season where they probably should have lost 2, 3, maybe. And it could have went the opposite way too. I mean, we talked about the ULM game. They could have been an 8-4 team, rather than a 9-3 one. So, that's sort of the thing that gives me a little bit of pause that I don't know how much better that's going to be or if they will take a stride in that area.
Could you could you imagine being an 8-4 team with a loss to ULM? Let's just yikes. That's rough. But anyways, talking about this front three, look, it's very experienced. We talked about Sean Collins, how good he is. Marcus Clark, really strong year last year up the middle as well. Santana Hopper is a guy that comes back 7.5 tackles for loss last year. I think the biggest thing is, can you stop the run? Like we talked about, you had 5 games where you gave up 200 or more rushing yards. You gotta find a way to get that under control. Granted, I know that at least one of them was against Kamani Vidal in the Sunbelt Conference Championship game, and we know how good he is. So can they improve that area? I think the experience plays big factors because when you look at these 3 guys, I know you lost one starter in Dingle Prince, but I mean Sean Clark was a sophomore last year. Marcus Clark was a sophomore last year. Sean Collins, excuse me, was a sophomore last year, and then Santana Hopper was only a freshman. So like these guys were young a year ago. So, does that extra year of experience and maybe getting beaten up a little bit last year, giving up 200 yards or more 5 times, maybe, want to make you get better this past offseason and be better in 2024? Probably. So, look, like Phil Steele said, I'm expecting big things from this App State defensive line. He has them rated as one of the best defensive lines in the Sun Belt, and we'll see if they can live up to that.
I will say this. Could you imagine, Matt, you mentioned potentially losing to ULM. Could you imagine saying, hey, last season we took the number 3 pick in the drafts team down to the wire and lost by 6, but we also lost to ULM? Could you imagine saying that?
That's the Sean Clark experience, man. This is my whole point about it.
I mean, he's gonna Matt's slowly dying over there. He's going to win some games very impressively, and then you're gonna have a couple each season, whether they're wins or losses. They're gonna play down to some teams that they have no business playing down to. And that's just sort of, like you said, the experience. And I think that's what has a lot of fans of the Mountaineers kind of pulling their hair out each season. I mean, I'll say this. I think I said this on the episode where we recapped it last season. The game where they lost to Wyoming, they were, let's see, 2-2 after that game. I went on Twitter, X, whatever the platform's called, and App State fans wanted him gone after 4 games because of what happened in 22, going 6-6, missing a bowl game because they had to play 2 FCS teams. And then coming in the next season and being 2-2, losing to Wyoming. North Carolina's fine. That's a fine loss. Like whatever. But people were pulling their hair out because they're like, why are we losing this game that we dominated every facet of? It just
you were up 27-7.
Yeah. I was talking about Wyoming, but yeah. They lost 22-19. But okay, so let's transition kind of to the linebacking core, and they've kind of got a unique setup because of the 3-4. Their leading pass rusher is going to come from the linebacker spot. Phil Steele says he likes Nate Johnson to be the leading or one of the leading pass rushers as far as sack production in the conference. They've got a long history of having guys that come off that end and are just ready to get after the quarterback. So Nate Johnson came in as a freshman last year, true freshman, 7.5 sacks, second team all Sun Belt at the pass rusher spot. I think it's just going to continue. I think the only real concern I have about the defense is their ability to stop the run. And it did burn them, I think, twice, 2 or 3 times of the 5 games that they gave up 200 yards on the ground last year. But they can rush the passer. There's no doubt about that. I mean, 35 sacks last year as a team.
Mm-hmm. I will point. I think something crazy is about this team is they had 200 yard or 100 tackle guys last year. One of those being a linebacker, and you just don't really see that. Most teams don't even crack 100 tackle guy, which again, I've not hid that I think tackles are a very circumstantial stat. It requires the ability to be in the right place at the right time. It gives me worry about the overall tackling ability about this team. There's a chance I'm just pulling something out of a hat here and looking too far into this. But from this linebacking core, that's what worries me. Nate Johnson is going to be exceptional. He was second team All Sun Belt last year as a true freshman, led the team in sacks with 7.5. It doesn't feel outlandish to predict he'll probably hit 9.5, 10 this year. That kid is a pass rushing freak. He's kind of slim. He's 230. At that size, definitely can't handle double teams if they come his way now that he's the identified threat. But I think this linebacking core has the athleticism requisite to run like a 3-4 type scheme and kind of make up for any run stopping deficiencies that may be up front, just because these guys have another year and it's a very similar core.
So I don't know if they do run a multiple front or not. I think I made a little bit of a mistake when I said that they run a 3-4. I think they run probably closer to like a 3-3-5. But I think Johnson drops down to be that extra fourth pass rusher. Now I will say I've watched 3-3-5 defenses in the past, and they do have trouble stopping the run because you only have 6 guys in the box. It's like all the running back needs to do is break one tackle, and everybody else is pretty much accounted for blocking wise. So that is sort of, you get the push and pull of like, hey, this is great, but also sometimes we just don't have the bodies up front. Or like you said, Zeke, Nate Johnson might be a prolific pass rusher, might not be a good run defender. I mean, it's just sort of, it is what it is. Like you said, he's 6'5", 230. He's definitely got the height, the length, and all that stuff. But if, let's use App State's own right tackle. Let's say Thomas Schrader at 6'5", 295 kicks out. I mean, yeah, he's getting around him with a speed move, but on a running play, he's only got to block him for a couple seconds, and then the running back is already by him. So, I mean, unless you run a stretch play, like handoff right into him, it might be an issue. But I think they'll get it cleaned up. I think they'll be better. I think it could still be kind of, I don't want to say the Achilles heel, but it could be a weak point for them for sure. Matt, do you have anything to kind of add on the linebacking core before we move to the secondary here?
Just that I'm a really big fan of Nate Johnson and Caden Sullivan. Nate Johnson, obviously, he showed what he can do last year with 7.5 sacks, second team all conference, like you guys talked about. But look, Caden Sullivan's a guy to watch too. Started 11 games a year ago, 64 tackles, just a really strong weak side linebacker. So we'll see how he does with another year of experience under his belt. But that core right there of Nate Johnson and Caden Sullivan should be a really strong unit for App State this year.
Yeah. And then I think the secondary is going to be the strength of the defense overall, outside of Nate Johnson. Last year, they only allowed opponents to throw for an average of 200 yards per game, which has got to be pretty low up there. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure James Madison was probably in that ballpark. But again, 35 sacks, so they were rushing the passer no matter what, and the secondary benefited from that. Ethan Johnson is a guy that I'd like to call out. 5'11", 195 last year, 56 tackles, 11 pass breakups, was second team All Sun Belt. I think that the DBs are going to keep on chugging. I don't really see a reason for them to fall off. They added some P5 transfers. They did lose Funderburk, Ross, Paul from the secondary, but they've been pretty good about just kind of plugging guys in and keeping the kind of machine running. And if they're still getting the same type of pass rushing production, I don't really see a way that this comes back to bite them, losing that production.
It comes down to the pass rush, and then I think it comes down to Avarian Cole, I think is the make or break of this defense, just because, as we talked about, the concerns we have in the past or in the run stopping. Varian Cole is a safety. Phil Steele has him listed as like the nickelback inside the box safety for them. I mean, it's just he's going to be the last guy in the box, and it's whether or not he can contribute in that role. He's a little undersized, I guess, for a box safety at 6'1", 190. I would like that closer to 200, but again, we're just kind of splitting hairs there. It comes from North Carolina A&T, so there's not a ton of top level production to look to. In the secondary, I think they're going to benefit from the incredible pass rush, and I don't think Varian Cole will be the best player on the defensive secondary, but I think he will be the most critical to their success.
Yeah, I really like what I've seen and heard about Avarian Cole. Brought up Ethan Johnson. I mean, his numbers speak for themselves. Another guy that I'm really going to be watching is Miles Farmer, the free safety. Spent 3 years at Nebraska and then spent last season at Syracuse. I mean, his entire career has been P5 experience, or I guess P4 now. So what does that look like when he comes into App State as the free safety spot? Can he bring that high level of experience, high level of leadership to this defense? But yeah, I agree with you, Brian. I think this is going to be the strength of maybe the entire team, but for sure the defense. Ton of experience, ton of talent. Really excited to see what they can do.
So one thing I forgot to mention when we were talking about the offense, and we'll go ahead and start talking about schedule and wins and stuff here. Phil Steele's computer algorithm model, whatever you want to call it, does have them taking the Matrix. He's Neo, and they're fighting the Smiths, trying to figure out how many points per game App's going to average on offense. He does have them projected to take a slight downturn from their past couple years in offensive points per game. We'll see if that happens, because he says that the schedule is tougher than what they played last year. But he has them at 31.9 points per game. So who knows? I mean, they don't play ULM this year, but that could be the difference between winning that type of game, or losing that type of game. So let's get into the schedule. They do have, I think they have 3 teams that they are really going to have to bring their A game to beat. And those teams to me are Clemson, Liberty, and I think Louisiana. And I think if they don't bring their A game to those, 3 games, they're probably not going to beat Clemson. Let's be honest. I think Clemson draws UGA week 1, so they're probably going to lose to the Bulldogs and then be pissed off and take it out on App. Let's be honest. So you got that going against you already, coming off of an FCS game against East Tennessee State. Liberty, Chadwell has given them issues when he had some of his later teams at Coastal, not in the earlier stages when he was, trying to piece together what was it, Joe Moglia's, leftovers. Once he got kind of his guys in and the Grayson McCall experience, I mean, he was a lot better against App. He's got a really good team at Liberty with, was it Caden Salter, their quarterback?
Ryan Berger now.
Well,
no, it's still Salter. Roster.
Yeah, it's still Salter. What if it was Ryan Berger revenge week and it was
that's what I'm rooting for.
We're letting Salter take the week off. He's got a shoulder thing. Man. But yeah, that would be a very funny narrative if that happened. But yeah, I mean, Clemson, you're probably not going to beat Clemson. They're going to be pissed off after losing to presumably Georgia week 1. Liberty, and then at Louisiana October 12th. I could see that really being a problem for them. We've talked, Matt, better than anybody the struggles that App's kind of had against Louisiana, especially in like big game situations. I don't know that they'll necessarily need to win that game to make the East title appearance, but it's the third loss that I could consider like something they need to worry about.
That's kind of what I was going to start my side of the schedule conversation with. Does 9-3 win you the East?
Yeah, probably.
Then
It depends.
Then they're golden.
It truly depends on what kind of team James Madison actually fields this year. Honestly, like I need to personally see it with a whole new roster, new coach, everything. I need to see it before I can say, hey, they're up for as many wins as App or Texas State. How would I discern that without seeing them play as a unit? So,
but
now that is a potential loss, I will say. But
we talk about the Liberty game, and as much as I agree that Liberty is a really good team, let's look at it from this perspective. So App plays South Alabama on a Thursday night. We can all agree that South Alabama is probably going to take a step back under new coach Major Applewhite. So App State's probably going to win that game. I know some crazy things can happen in the Fun Belt, but App State's probably going to win that game. So they get 9 days off between games. You don't have to travel. And App State has to come, Liberty has to come to you, to the Rock, a place where crazy things have happened. Now, I'm not saying that, Liberty's going to be this crazy, 14-point favorite on the road against App. But App State could win that game at home. Pretty easily, I would say.
Oh. Liberty's a good team, but they are incredibly fraudulent.
So, like, we're actually, you and I were talking about those 3 games that they would have to bring their A game. Say App beats Liberty. Then you can have one of those traditional Sean Clark screw-up games against anybody you wish. Yep. Because there's not a bad loss in conference, at least. I mean, Marshall, you can chalk that up to being a rival. Georgia State,
that would be a bad loss.
That'd be it. That's a bad loss. Old Dominion's a bad loss. I think James Madison and Georgia Southern could feasibly be losses. I think like Southern could just hang 50 and they can't keep up. And then James Madison, it depends on what James Madison looks like. I think you're right. There are 3 like major games on the schedule, but we're discounting what Matt just talked about. How many Sean Clark losses are we going to see? I think he's good for 2 extra losses, and that might still be good enough to win the East, especially if some of those losses are coming to Liberty and Clemson out of conference. But this whole team revolves around how many Sean Clark losses are we going to get? How many, games are we going to start down 0-21, or how many 21-0 leads are we going to blow? It is the true through line for this team.
The crazy thing looking at their schedule for me is they could be 11-1 or 8-4, and I wouldn't blink either way.
Mm-mm.
Like if they lost all 3 of those and then found a way to trip up, I don't know, again at Coastal on November 7th on a Thursday, I would be like, yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
Like, and it sucks to say for them, but like, you always run that risk of, what we've been talking about where, Wyoming's going to be a free square in bingo. They're just going to be an easy, nope. Why couldn't we beat Wyoming when we had the advantage in every facet of the game? Don't know. Still went to the East title. Still represented the East in the title game. So
right,
you always run that risk. I will say, if I had to bet over under, I'd say over. Like I said, there's a chance you push on that and you win exactly 8. I think they would probably win the bowl game, presumably, depending on who it would be against, and that would put you over the hump. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a wide range of outcomes. I don't think a lot of them, unless they have like a crappy out of nowhere South Alabama 2023 season, I just don't think that's necessarily in the cards for them. All right. So that's App State. We have them as the overwhelming favorite in the East. I mean, they have to be, the favorites to represent the East in the Sun Belt title game. Let's turn the page and move to the West side. Texas State. Now, I want to say this, but we have mentioned this on previous episodes, but just in case that people didn't listen to like the draft episode that we did with the prospects or the Phil Steele one, let's just put in context how lucky they were to get the Sun Belt Player of the Year. So first, there's this weird rift that showed up kind of at the end of last year with TJ Finley and GJ Kinney. There were games where they were taking Finley out at halftime, even though he wasn't necessarily playing that poorly. They got blown out by Arkansas State for seemingly no reason, just kind of threw up their hands. There were weird things happening at the end of last season's schedule. They bring in a transfer in Jaden DeLora, who joins the team. Finley, because of this, and feels like, hey, my job's not secure for whatever reason, he exits. Jaden DeLora, I think, leaves before spring practice even starts, and I think he entered himself into the NFL draft or the supplemental draft, one of those two.
Mhm.
He doesn't get drafted. He's in like the XFL or UFL or whatever they call it last time I looked for the San Antonio team. Then you just have the reigning Sun Belt Player of the Year in Jordan McLeod fall right into your lap while he's looking for a new home, with Bob Chesney and all of this roster turnover and James Madison starting to kind of reformulate from where they were last year. And guess what? You not only got lucky, you upgraded at the quarterback position. You went from probably the third or fourth best QB in the conference to the absolute best until otherwise shown. So they truly could not have. I don't know if GJ Kinney sat on a rabbit's foot or like has a horseshoe somewhere that we don't know about. Like there is just this weird luck thing around them where even when they fail, they succeed. Like I don't really understand it.
They're
Right.
going to go to the college football playoffs.
What?
I think they're the fifth ranked conference champion.
Nope.
No,
Yes.
no, I don't think so.
There's
I'll get into my reasons for saying no, but
there's a legendary program in the Pacific Northwest that everybody is sleeping on because they've been down for the last couple of years. But they've got a young quarterback by the name of Malachi Nelson.
do you think Boise?
Oh, yeah.
If
Boise's
it's not
making the
Texas
playoff.
State, it's certainly not Boise.
Boise's making the playoff as the G5 rep.
No, it's Texas State. I'll say it right now. Texas State goes undefeated in Sun Belt play.
Okay,
I wouldn't be shocked if it. Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if it was Liberty, honestly. Like, and I don't like
fraudulent. Conference
I
USA.
don't like
man.
to say that.
They're not going to give Conference USA the nod.
If they're 12-0 and they're winning every conference game by 104 points, they think about this. The committee knew so little that they kept Florida State out undefeated last year and let Alabama sneak in. Do you think they're really going to go through and dig and see who the absolute best G5 team is? No. They're going to look at wins and losses and go, wow, this Liberty team, they won by a lot every game this year. And that's as far as they're going to look into it.
Texas State's going to go 11-1 too, at least.
I don't know where you're getting this from, to be totally honest.
All right, let's get into it.
I'll get into it. Okay, so we talked about McLeod. I mean, reigning Sun Belt Player of the Year. 35 touchdowns, completed 68% of his passes. First team Sun Belt, obviously. 3,600 plus yards. There's not really anything else to say. Like I said, they got lucky falling. He fell right into their lap. I don't know if it was a Grayson McCall type situation where he couldn't make grades or something anywhere else, but like there's no reason he should still be playing at the P5 or a G5 level. He should be a P5 quarterback somewhere. If Grayson McCall could start at NC State, Jordan McLeod, who played better than him, should be at an equal or better school at this point.
Does Indiana already
Am I
have a
wrong?
quarterback? Is that why he didn't follow?
See, that's the thing, is that would be the natural progression, and it just never came to fruition. I felt like it felt like it was weird. Like, he put himself out there and was on social media and was saying, I'm in the portal, I'm taking visits, taking offers, blah blah blah, and it just felt like none of that ever came together the same way that it happened with Grayson McCall the year before, where Chadwell leaves. So, like, I don't really understand what happened. I'm sure there's some behind the scenes stuff with that, but he should be playing at a higher level. He's good enough easily to be playing at North Carolina or whatever, what have South Carolina, like wherever. Like, I guarantee you there aren't however many. Let's say there's 12 teams in each, the ACC and SEC. There's no way there's 24 quarterbacks better than him. There's just no way. So, it almost feels a little unfair. But with that said, the offense for me, Zeke, and I'll get into the reasons. I already talked about, they're going to be the most talented offense, I think, top to bottom in the Sun Belt. My concern is with their defense, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Ismail Mahdi at the running back spot, second team All-American last year, 1,300 yards in 10 starts, 6 yards a carry. They're not going to have any issues running the football with him or McLeod scrambling. So, well, okay, Zeke, let you talk about it. You penciled them in for the college football playoff. Let's talk about it. Why?
So
Why?
I think we'll start offense first, right? You're right. Best P5 quarterback in the country in Jordan McLeod. Ismail Mahdi, second team, not second team Sun Belt last year, second team All-American. You return Hobart, who was an exceptional receiver for you last season. You return Cole Wilson, who was an exceptional receiver for you last year. Those are two guys that had 700 yards. Hobart was approaching 900. Offensive line, exceptional last year. Almost all the guys back, only replacing your center, a guy who made some appearances at guard for Texas State last season. Offense, as you said, will be by far the best in the conference, and if not one of the single best in P5, P6, whatever we're calling
G5.
it now. G5, sorry, thank you. You move over the defense, I hear what you're saying, but this defense was also exceptional last year. They don't lose any pieces. The guys are young. A lot of these guys were juniors last season, so they're seniors now. I cannot point to any point on this roster, and this is what I've done my role in each of our preview seasons has been to point out something nitpicky that I don't like, and that's why I don't like that team. I cannot find that for this Texas team. I just ran through. They have every position covered offensively. Defensively, they were exceptional last year, and it's the same group. I don't know how you can see last year's Texas State team perform so well, look around the Sun Belt, and not predict this team goes undefeated in the Sun Belt.
So I'm gonna make two disagreements with you about Texas State's defense. Yes, they return a large portion of their defense, but they did lose their best defensive player from last year in Brian Holloway.
Yeah,
which is a huge blow. We're talking about a guy that had 100 plus tackles last year.
I got you. Well, you know my stance on tackles. I don't care.
But
he had 14 for loss. 14 for loss.
On top of that, I don't know in what world giving up 33 points a game is a, quote, phenomenal defense. They gave up 33 points a game.
That's inflated by the 77 to Arkansas and the 44 to South Al. And I'm not excusing those performances. Those were abysmal performances. But take those out, and you were looking at again like a top half defense in this conference. The 77 to Arkansas State, as Brian said at the top, this team, kind of like how Brian talks about Southern, a team that just like doesn't have the guts sometimes. Over those last two games, showed flashes of that. Take out the 77 and 44. That's 100. That's 5 games worth of points. This was a very strong defense last year.
You also lost to a Grayson McCall-less Coastal Carolina,
who we've said on this pod was better without Grayson McCall.
I disagree wholeheartedly. I disagreed with that wholeheartedly.
They were performing as well, if not better.
And then you only beat ULM by 1. You only beat ULM by 1.
I agree, but so did App State, and we had nothing but good things to say about App State.
And then here is the other caveat, and I'm gonna diss my own team.
Mm-hmm.
Louisiana should not have beaten Texas State last year.
No.
Should not have.
No.
So how did it happen?
I'm not talking about last year, Matt.
Because their defense choked away a 10-point lead. Their defense choked away a 10-point lead.
A 10-point choke away. 10-point leads is not choking away a lead. 10-point lead is 10-point lead is score stop score.
If you have a 10-point lead going into the fourth quarter in a conference game, you should not lose.
I mean, let's be totally honest. They had a couple of games. They had a couple of games there down the stretch, known to be losing. They just they dropped them for like seemingly no reason. I mean, the Arkansas State game notwithstanding, to get beat 77-31 is flat embarrassing. To do it to Arkansas State, a team that very notably we've talked about doesn't have a defense. Like they couldn't go score for score with Arkansas State. Like that's pretty eye-popping. You lose to Troy, that happens, whatever. Louisiana, Matt already talked about it. And then you lose to Coastal without Grayson McCall, who we talked about last week, weirdly got better when McCall was out. I don't remember if it was Vasco or Guest that started that game, but they just had some like inexplicable losses. And it makes me wonder if it was a TJ Finley thing or if it was a GJ Kinney over the whole team thing. And that's a question I think that we're going to get an answer to this year. Because if you can't make a push for the West with McLeod at QB, then it's just not going to happen. So I think it's time to kind of put up or shut up. And it's tough to say that in a guy's year 2 at a school. But with this offense that he has, like, it's not going to get better from here. It's only going to get worse. So
now shift your eyes again. We're kind of skipping the position by position breakdown. Shift your eyes to their schedule and tell me who beats them, especially within conference. I think Arizona State could end up being a loss, just kind of depending on what Arizona State puts out this year. Tell me what Sunbelt team beats them. Not Troy, not Arkansas State.
I think
not Old Dominion.
I think Louisiana could beat them.
Louisiana
could.
I think Louisiana could beat them.
But they're playing Texas at Texas State.
Well,
Louisiana's off high.
If history repeats itself, Arkansas State could hang 70 on them again.
They could. They won't.
And then you see, here's the biggest thing about
you would
the
have
Louisiana.
said that last year, though.
Here's the biggest thing about the Louisiana matchup.
Mm-hmm.
Texas State has never beaten the Cajuns. Never once. That means something.
Texas State's also never gone 12-0 and made the college football playoffs.
They're not going to go 12-0 this year either.
They're not going to go 12-0. Well, I can already tell you that.
I think they win at least. At best 13-2.
At best they're 10-2.
I think 10-2 is the floor. Etch this in
based
stone,
on
boys.
what? They're going to have to score 60 points a game to be that good.
I like this team.
Zeke, are you on drugs? Should we start drug testing you before
No.
each episode?
You're gonna have to score 60 a game to be that good.
All right. Let me be wrong then.
Well, I haven't looked at UTSA this year. UTSA has fielded some very talented teams. Now, I don't know what the outlook for them is. I don't know if they still have Frank Karras at quarterback. He could be, if he's still there, he could be a real difference maker, but I have no idea what they look like. But like I said, last year they had a really good team too, and they found a way to slide down the back stretch. It was like once they hit a couple losses, I mean, the to say the train went off the tracks would be putting it mildly. The train careened into a nuclear plant and exploded and set off an atom bomb. Like, there's a difference between the train coming off the tracks is like, we were supposed to make the title game. We lost by a week. We dropped a game we shouldn't have. This was catastrophe at the end of last season for them. I'm sorry, I dipped out for a minute, like computer issues. How much did you guys talk about the defense? Because that's what I want to talk about.
Well, I hit on the fact that they gave up 33 points a game.
They gave up 246 yards passing per week. What do we think that teams in the Sun Belt like to do? Throw the football generally. A lot of these
They also
teams
gave
are
up
not
150 a week on the ground.
right. So I guess my question, Zeke, since you are the most bullish on them of the three of us easily. I mean, we're kind of trying to tamp this down a little bit. How much of a jump do you see them making defensively? Do you see them turning into a
I think so.
middle of the pack defense?
So when Brian or Matt had mentioned was it 38 per game, 36 per game allowed, and it, like your yardage concerns, are inflated by Arkansas hanging 77 on them. They're inflated by 44 from South Al. That's not to discredit that's not to discredit those games and say they didn't happen and they're not worth examining. But I'm of the opinion that's not this team.
I mean, how about giving up 36 to Southern Miss? Like, how about giving up 34 to Jackson State? Like, yeah, you scored 77, but you basically just flipped the score from the Arkansas State game. There's so many games I could point to that would just pop your balloon as far as that goes. I mean, okay, again, Southern Miss, you allowed 510 yards of offense in that game. Jackson State, they gave up 400 yards to an FCS school. Like, they gave up 524 to Baylor.
The core of this defense is the same. They do lose their best defensive player from a statistical and talent perspective. But they're returning like 8 starters, half of who were juniors last year. Yeah.
Is that a good thing? This is Matt, can we have a sidebar for 2 seconds? Matt, what is up with this guy? Like, what is up with him? He's like Mr. Rain on my parade for all these other teams that we project to be pretty good, and then he's like, Texas State is going to be the best team since the 01 Miami Hurricanes, and you're just like, okay.
Can we turn on can we turn on Zeke's location sharing and see how many trips to San Marcos he takes this season? I think he might be in with them. Oh, look. Do I think that Texas State is going to be bad? No. God, no. There's no chance in hell that Texas State's going to be a bad football team. Are they going to run the table and be in the first ever edition of the 12-team college football playoff? Also, hell no. Like, you're not.
Right. So the other thing too that Zeke kind of, I guess either discounted or forgot about was that would also mean that they have to beat App for the Sun Belt title. Do you think they're a better team than App as they sit today?
I think they
See, this
beat App.
is what he didn't consider. Yeah,
I don't know if
he was just like regular season.
No, I think App is the better team, but I think they beat App.
That's my question.
I mean, based on I suppose based on vibes, but what is the counter argument based on, if not vibes?
The counter argument is they can't stop anybody.
Because right now, before the season, all we have to go off of is on paper, and we just sat here and said that on paper, App State's the better team. So on paper, what are you saying Texas State beats App?
And keep in mind, like 30 minutes ago, he agreed with that.
Like I'm not trying to excuse my French here, but I'm not trying to shit on your argument because I don't necessarily disagree with it. I just want to know, like, based on what do you think Texas State beats App?
Go back to what I use the same thing. It's one of those gut calls. I think Texas State, there's no disagreement that Texas State is the best team in the West. There's no disagreement that they are, at worst, the third best team in the conference, right? And you could, like, depending on how Coastal or JMU or Troy show up, possibly be the second best, right? But they're, at worst, Texas State is third. I adored what I saw out of Texas State. Upon reflection of last season, I thought it was an exceptional year. And Brian, you're cringing. I don't see.
No, I'm not cringing. I think it's hilarious because you took a giant dump all over Arkansas State and said, "Sorry, I'm tired of hearing about it every year," and then was like, "Yeah, they lost to him by 43. Who cares?" Vibes.
Look, I stand by what I say about Texas State or Arkansas State, and I stand by what I'm saying now.
You know what, Matt? You know what I'm going to start doing? Forget the gambling, like, betting notebook, like, spreadsheet. I'm just going to start writing down all of Zeke's takes, and then when he contradicts them, I'm going to read them back to him.
Please do, because I forget.
That's my idea.
And if I'm contradicting myself, let me know. But I feel like I stand solid on this, that I don't think Arkansas State's good. Look, I mean, Brian, you and I have been podcasting for 3 years. I've never thought they were good.
Well, that's what I mean, though, is you're basically like saying, okay, I don't believe in Arkansas State. I don't believe in Butch Jones. I think it's all a smokescreen. I think they've been pumped up way too much. And then I'm like, here's the evidence that says, like, that counters your exact argument about Texas State. And, like, this is their defensive issues, all this stuff. And you're like, disregard it. I choose to disregard it.
And
it's
also,
like, okay.
Also, to counteract that, or to go along with that, should I say, you don't believe in Arkansas State, which is fine. That's your prerogative, right? They weren't good. They had one good year that people might think is a fluke, right? Like all that. I get that. Can't you say the same thing about Texas State?
No, because they've had the one good year, but the one good year came under the new regime. This was unprecedented improvement that we saw from Texas State from 2022 to 2023. It was beyond what any of us expected, and it feels crazy to me to not at least be open to the possibility of a similar progression.
Matt, I actually kind of agree with him on that. I think even through 1 year, GJ Kinney is proven more than Butch Jones has in 4 years or whatever so far. All I'm saying is we talked about all the production Arkansas State brings back, and Zeke on that episode was like, I'm tired of it, don't want to hear about it. And then it was like, okay, well, what about last year when they lost, when they beat Texas State by 40, and he's like, don't worry about it.
I mean, I think I'm not disagreeing. Again, I don't want to say that game didn't happen, because it did. But you would be disingenuous to tell me that is the standard or the average level of play for either of those teams. And so to use that as a barometer is a disingenuous.
I want to pivot because we've been going way too hard on this one take, but I want to say this: who's to say, because we only have 1 year of sample, who's to say GJ Kinney isn't just Sean Clark out in the West and have these issues where whoop-de-doo, all of a sudden 1 week, guess what? We're giving up 77 for seemingly no reason. You know?
Find out.
Or we're playing
and I'll eat.
We're playing we're playing a bad, ULM team down to the wire. We're, giving up 34 to an FCS HBCU team for seemingly no reason. Okay, anyway, so I will say this, Phil Steele does project them defensively to take a step forward. Again, personally, I need to see it before I could. It's the same thing with Arkansas State. Like, I can't wave my hand and go, you haven't seen anything here. Like, these aren't the droids you're looking for. Like, they're gonna be way better, and I have nothing to base this off but just the air around the team. He does project them to take a step forward and only allow 27.2 points per game this year. Another thing I wanted to say, I forgot to mention this when we were talking about McLeod. I think this is going to be interesting for McLeod in that there were a lot of games last year when he was at JMU that he could kind of just take his foot off the gas and be like, my defense is going to handle this. So now what does it look like when you're playing in a more up-tempo offense with a worse defense that's going to allow a lot more points? What does that sort of look like? That's interesting to me. I want to see how that all shakes out. Ben Bell is back on the defensive line for the Bobcats. He was second team Sun Belt last year. But, I went through and looked. It's like linebacker and defensive back might be a real issue for them again. Like, I just don't... There's nothing that I can point to and be like, without a doubt, they are going to be better. I think it could be, once again, just shootout city in San Marcos. Now, they have a way better quarterback. I think they could make it work. I think they have, like I said, top to bottom, the best offense. But it's going to be tough to win every game 52-41. Like, every week isn't just going to be like, all right, we just checked this box. We're just going to score 50 every week. Like, that's really hard to bank on. So, I don't know. Do we have anything else on Texas State? Or Zeke, do you have any more takes that we would like to fry up?
I have
okay.
I think they go 9-3.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about the schedule part.
I think they go 9-3. I've got them losing to UTSA. I've got them losing to Arizona State, and I've got them losing to Louisiana.
I think that's fine. I think they're gonna lose. I think they're gonna go 9-3. I don't know, man. For some reason, I look at the Arkansas State game on the schedule, and that game from last year is just etched into my brain. Like, I can't drop it. I think that game, no matter what the over-under is, I think I'm gonna bet the over. Like, I don't even care what you can set the line right now, and I'll be like, yep, 100 points sounds good. I'll take it. So, I think that game is going to be one that comes down to the last possession. I think Louisiana is going to be a tough test for them, and I think UTSA as well. Unless UTSA just completely bottoms out, I think they're going to give them a game at the very least. But all three of those games that I just mentioned are all at home, and also Arizona State, don't really know what to expect from them. They were a train wreck under Herm Edwards, so I have no idea. That's all I'll say. Their over-under is 8. Would we all comfortably take the over? Zeke, I know you've already got their spot in the College Football Hall of Fame carved out, so we don't even need to ask you. Matt, you've got them for over 8, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Do we have anything else before we sign off here? If not, Matt, go ahead and let everybody know where they can find your work, where they can find you, and then Zeke, go ahead after him, and then I'll close it out.
I want whatever Zeke's on. But you can find me on social media at MiguezMatt. Also ESPN_SWLA. That is the day job, covering the Louisiana Raging Cajuns, LSU Tigers, New Orleans Saints, and so much more. So check us out there.
I'm on Twitter at Zeke Palermo, ZekePalermo. State fans, I expect to see a big influx of you in my following. Arkansas State fans, Southern Miss fans, I expect you to have already blocked me by now. Brian, send us home.
As always, you can email us or tweet at us. We'd love to, read questions, comments, things like that. You can find us at warmweatherfans@gmail.com, at warmweatherfans on X. You can find me on X at Watch the Stone. We have been, we talked about this beforehand. We're looking into potentially adding video to kind of our repertoire, so to speak. So we're working on getting that maybe up and running by the time this actual season starts, maybe a little bit later than that. And I will be setting up the betting sheets in the next couple days, and we'll have everybody's last season records so you can look back at that. And we will talk about those, record our picks, and kind of have something to kind of back up our quote unquote expertise. But we're second to last episode of Sunbelt Previews. Next week is JMU and Troy, and then it's football season, boys. It's time for actual games. So this has been another episode of Warm Weather Fans, the Sunbelt Podcast.